Welcome to the NPD Podcast, the show where we dig into what's actually working or not when it comes to scaling businesses with the people who've been there. Today's guest has definitely been there. So why don't you go ahead? Why don't you introduce yourself? Tell them where you're at, where you've been, where you're going.
My name is Jake Strack. I've been living in Salt Lake City for my entire life. I've done a lot of different things, as most entrepreneurs. I've got a couple of tech startups that we got to MVP. One we got to market, which is where I'm at now. And I started my career as an evaporative cooler service company as the CEO and president of that. And we had 14x that before we exited, so it was quite a journey. But yeah, now I'm working on Mingle, which is a participant centered video conferencing application and digital office space for people to connect like they would in the real world, but in a two-dimensional space.
So when you first start working with a company, what are areas of opportunity you look for to help them scale and overcome failure?
One of the first things I typically look at, because I do a lot of consulting, is I will look at um, how their customers are communicating with them. How's the information coming in? How do we standardize that? And how do we answer it quickly? And how do we make sure that nothing falls through the cracks? Um, Transparency has always been a thing that I've looked for with your customers. What I noticed back when I was running my evaporative service cooler company, a lot of our calls were coming in for price checks. They were just wanted to know the price. And this was back before you had AI prompts and you had those kind of if-then statements. I built an if-then through our phone system where you could press one or press two if you have this issue, if you have this issue, and it'd walk you through an entire tree, and then would give you a price, and then ask you if you want to schedule the appointment. But I look for opportunities to make that process quick so that the lead can get the information they need relatively quickly without having to actually talk to anyone. Because honestly, most of us don't want to get on the phone with a salesperson. And then how to turn that lead into a sell. And then just a lot of operations. I look at processes and see where we have redundancies, and how do we streamline those so that we don't have to continue to manually do that. So that allows us to scale much faster because now we need less people on the phones, we need less people answering emails. We're getting all of that taken care of, and it's all taken care of in one place.
Got it. So you get in there, identify potential pain points, or trying to think of what would you call the call thing, because the call thing could
Bottlenecks.
not.
I
What's that?
call them bottlenecks.
Bottlenecks, yeah. And then you look for how to solve those problems. So what are different ways that you approach going into trying to identify and ask questions or find these issues?
If I'm working with a client, or I'm just in a business, usually I'll try to get in and do the work myself to see that's the best way to get it, because then you're seeing what needs to be done, what doesn't need to be done. But questions I'll usually ask are, we'll take the example of the workflow for the calls, right? Questions you usually ask are, what are people asking? Why are they calling? Like what's the number one question you get? And then you try to solve how can we answer that. Or another solution I find is I usually try to look at an operation and I find one key thing in that operation that if they can solve that and optimize for it, then you can actually streamline the process. So I'll give you, or make it a faster process. So I'll give you an example with my technicians. One of the things was you had to go up and down the ladder because you had to get on the roof to work on the evaporative cooler, right? If you can minimize the amount of times you have to go up and down that ladder, you're going to be faster at your process, right? So we found ways to minimize that. I took the same process in my office work, which is I figured out how to the least amount of times I could touch my mouse,
Mhm.
because the more you touch your mouse, the longer it's going to take, right? So those kind of thought processes and boiling it down to that. But to get to that, it takes a lot of, really just getting to know how their operations are. What are they doing now? What's in place? What has to be in place? What outcome do they need? And then completely think outside of the box of what they're doing, but try to work within their workflow so that it becomes more streamlined.
I don't think anyone's thinking about how often they touch their mouse. What what were things you did to stop touching the mouse? What would be some examples?
I learned the shift tab, alt tabs, those kind of things.
Hotkeys.
Right. Yep. A lot of mine was in QuickBooks, so it was understanding how to jump back and forth between screens without actually having to touch my mouse.
Yeah, what is it? Control tab. I do it so naturally now. When I was first starting, I was an analyst and I printed out the hotkeys for Excel. So I could just sit there and boom, 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 boom. And pretty amazing.
It makes it a lot faster.
Yeah. So, people would stand there and you'd start doing something, be like, how do you do it so fast? And you're like, well, I just see that sheet right there. I just remembered it. It's 20 different hotkeys.
It was funny when the problem I get is when I learn those and I try to teach somebody, I'm going so fast that they don't see what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And they're like, how did you do that? It's like, oh yeah, that's right. I just know how to do this so fast that I know these fast keys to make it happen. So it's really funny when you get into it. But the other thing I always like to when I get into a business, I like to figure out what's the mission, right? If we're not focused on the same mission and we don't have the same goals, and we're spinning our wheels and somebody may be working in an alternate direction. Right. So how do you unify the vision of what the company's going to be in 5 years from now? And then how do you distill that information into the workforce in order to accomplish that goal? Because if we're all focused on that, then we make the decisions that'll actually bring us to that vision. And it's extremely important, even though, I always kind of thought it was fluff before. And that's because you'd come up with a vision and then you'd post it on the wall, right? And then nobody would actually live by that.
Board.
Or the values, right? Like that's another one. But the thing is when you actually instill those into your workforce, it actually becomes more cohesive, and everybody starts working in the same direction with the same vision, with the same values. Mm-hmm. And then it starts to actually give you the ability to scale much, much faster than you having to be like, hey, why did you do that exactly? Or why are you going this direction? That's away from our vision. And they're like, oh, what is our vision again?
It's funny. It
What's our goal?
Yeah, we had our core values for one company I was managing marketing sales for. He had frugality, and it drove me crazy because it was like, I can't test anything with frugality. Like, you're expecting to hit a bullseye, the center of a bullseye every time. Like, that's not how this works. You can't be that frugal and grow the business this way. But so getting people bought into it is another thing too.
Yeah, exactly. One of the biggest ones I've done recently is I went in we brought me in. I was basically the manager of the restaurant. It was a fine dining establishment that's been around for a long time. But when I got there, I realized the last thing they needed was another manager. So I came in as a guest experience consultant, right? Mm-hmm. And looking at it from the guest experience, and through that lens, I was able to communicate with the employees and find out what their goals were and kind of unify that whole thing. And in that situation, I was the one running the operation, but the biggest issue was that they had multiple emails that were receiving private dining requests, and you would get those in multiple ways. And so what I did was I unified that all into a ticketing system that you use for technical support, so that way we didn't drop the ball on any. Yeah. And then I built a form that actually allowed for logic to be in place to gather the information. Called it our virtual assistant. You walk through it, and then all that information would come into our Google Sheet, and then that would be used through a JSON code to create a quote that would then be reviewed by the event coordinator and sent off to the client. So something that used to take 2 to 3 weeks and 20 emails, Now we got a couple where we actually booked it within a couple of hours. So it's like that kind of streamline completely changes your level of professionalism, how you're perceived by your guest or your client. And it also makes it your employees much happier because then they're not having to do all this redundant, annoying
Busywork.
task. Hmm.
Yeah, no, and it's amazing when I come across businesses and you think they've got things together because they're growing, they have a good appearance, and then you get under the hood and you're like, what are you guys doing? How'd you get as far as you did? Like, you didn't even automate your booking system yet? Like, what's going on? Um,
Yeah.
okay, so you start working with them, you identify these bottlenecks through it. Sounds like what you do is you get your hands dirty. You get in there, you find a way to experience the business, and then you start going, okay, bad customer experience here. Employees are frustrated here. Let's solve these problems. And now you've got this new business that's solving problems as well too, which is what everyone's going towards is that human interaction piece that's really started. I mean, it's the video calls are great, but like breakout sessions and things like that for internal and external, right? Like, so what are you seeing as the business issues and how you're help solving that with this?
Right now, the biggest issue we have is traction, right? We're going into a market that is dominated by Zoom and Google Meets and Teams, right? So these are big, huge, giant companies that have had a long time doing this, and really testing the assumption: do people actually want the ability to choose who they're clustering with, right? Who they're breaking out with, that kind of thing. So the problem is you have to get people on first to do that. So the way we're solving that right now is, we're looking at our marketing and looking at who we think would want to actually talk to the other person on the video call, right? Instead of like, I see you, you're my friend, I want to cluster with you. That How do we get that happening on the event itself instead of people just sitting, turning off their camera, the normal Zoom interaction. Turn off your camera and just listen,
Mm-hmm.
right? Don't actually interact. And you know what? Check your emails while you're doing it because you're not really interested in the conversation anyway. So what we pinpointed was a couple of different markets that we wanted to test. And so now what we're doing is we built landing pages for those three markets. One was dating. Obviously, there's a reason for you to want to connect one-on-one on that. The other one was workshops. We workshops are Online workshops are very boring right now
Mm-hmm.
with the current webinar style event. You don't have any kind of interaction with anybody that's there except for in chat, and that's usually spammy anyway. And you don't have a way to actually interact with the people that are on stage, right, who are on the webinar. So what we built in was the ability to, before the event, you can cluster with people and you can talk to them just like you would at a networking event. During the actual webinar, you can raise your hand and you can get pulled up to stage and actually talk directly to the people that are giving the workshop. So it creates this real world interactive experience that you wouldn't get otherwise. So the third one is, what we're lacking in remote work is culture. We feel isolated. We're sitting in a room by ourselves all day long, and the only coworker interaction we get is through Slack, right? Or at meetings where we all just turn off our cameras and check our emails. So the idea here is how do we bring back that hallway interaction or that feeling of sitting next to somebody's cubicle, right? Like how do you bring that back? And so what we've done is we created a what we call a Mingle suite, and this is a place where you can do your work and you're on video or you turn your video off, but you can actually see your coworkers as if you were there.
Hmm. It's
And
like a
I
live
can
stream.
see, yeah, I can see, oh, Jason's not really too busy. If I have a quick question, I can ask you the question because a lot of the time, or if I just want to catch up, I can cluster with you and we can catch up real quick. Hey, how was your weekend? Those kind of questions build culture. And in remote teams, that's lacking. Like we do
Mm-hmm.
not have a way of doing that. So the those three markets, what we've done is we've actually now built landing pages for all three of them. we're running Google ads on them to get to some actual numbers on what kind of interaction we're getting from our advertisements and which ones are actually resonating and bringing people in. And then what we'll do is we'll actually narrow that down to one market that will penetrate with all of our ability. So it's unifying the market strategy because right now all of our strategies are based on assumptions, right?
Right. Yeah, and ads will get data there quick.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you ever target any other ad platforms like Reddit? Because I could see people talking about these different things and finding a way to get them in there. But your niche, because you need that decision maker within the company, so it's not as broad of a
Well,
target.
not necessarily. I think
Yeah.
I think you're on to something. We have talked about it. I just haven't had the time to sit down and actually do it.
I know.
Right? Like
Add it to the list.
you got to build up your community. Like you got to build up your reputation in the community in order to
That
actually like
karma.
engage. So we've thought about maybe doing Reddit advertisement. I believe they do advertising.
They do.
We just haven't gotten into it yet.
Because
We
yeah, I was thinking
probably
like,
will.
mhm.
Sorry,
I would
go
say
ahead.
like Reddit, Quora, Medium, and targeting specific subreddits where like these things are going on with human interaction in the workplace. Like I could see
Yeah.
that popping up in there.
Well, and we don't really need a decision maker, right? Like a lot of uh, a lot of remote teams probably have the ability to use the tools. The team manager has the ability to say, "Hey, I want to use this tool."
Hmm.
You think about Slack. That's how
Yeah.
Slack started, right? And that's who we look at as our biggest competitor. Slack is the number one communication tool for teams right now,
Yeah.
especially remote teams. But what if you could actually talk to the person instead of just ping them? Because when you ping them, you have no idea what they're working on, so you're hesitant to actually reach out, and you're not going to talk about, your wife or your kids or
Yeah.
what you did this weekend because it doesn't feel right.
I'm noticing businesses move away from Slack,
Interesting.
starting to now, and I'm noticing like Google Meet because it's easy and you could just do a breakout huddle real quick. I don't
Hmm.
know what it is. I just see things go like Teams is still strong, but Slack I'm starting to see maybe not enterprise SaaS companies, but like a lot of the businesses I'm seeing, they're kind of going, well, we'll go back to Google because they got a good platform. It's easy to use and it's part of the G Suite.
Yeah, exactly. So it's something we already have. Why not use it?
Yeah.
And that's the biggest challenge we face, right?
Hmm.
Is that's exactly what people are doing is they're using things that they already have access to.
Yeah. Is there a way to
So we're
integrate
trying
with them?
if they'll let you,
Yeah,
right?
true.
Like it's more of a it's we're a competitor, so why would they let us integrate with them?
True.
Um, that is one of the avenues I've been an advocate of is to integrate versus compete.
Hmm.
Basically, become the solution that works within the other application,
Yeah.
but that's not the current trajectory we're on.
Right. Because I noticed in Discord they're doing the audio video thing, or at least the audio thing.
They're
Um,
doing the audio thing, not really as well with the video thing.
yeah, and because been doing that for some technical support, been seeing a lot of that. Well, they'll have breakouts in there, um, but still, it's it doesn't feel personal. You got people. There's no camera. Well, it's also they're not employees; it's support. But I'm building that culture. I think it's a great idea because it's so lost from these virtual teams now that we have, where you don't see them. You just connect with them when you need to get something done, and that's it. You move on. There's no
Exactly.
relationship built.
Is it surprising that we all feel isolated and lonely?
Unless you
Right?
got kids. If you got kids, I got kids. I don't feel isolated with them. They keep me outside. But like, if it wasn't for them, if I was just running the show and only doing that, it'd be like, man, I'm stuck
Well,
in here.
even then, it's the adult interaction, right? Like
Yeah.
when you're dealing with kids all day, they're not stimulating you
Or well, I'm talking to
intellectually.
the parents. I mean, like, I talk to the other kids' parents, so it's not.
Yeah, yeah, but you
Yeah.
see what I'm saying.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. No, cool. So, if someone's listening, trying to scale right now, what's one piece of advice you wish you had earlier?
Ooh, that's a good question. The best thing I would have thought about a long time ago, and this is one of the biggest biggest mistakes I've made in business, and I wish I knew this beforehand, is that um, just because an expert says it does not mean that it necessarily applies to you, right? And I'll give you the example because it's a great story. I was running my organization, and we were scaling very, very rapidly. My first company, and I mean, we had that hockey stick growth. It was ridiculous
Mm-hmm.
how fast we were moving. Um, and I was at a convention, which I rarely got out of my office, so I was surprised I was at this convention. And they had a professor on there that had started something like 100 businesses. And I asked him, hey, how much should I be spending on advertising? Like just out of curiosity. And he's like,
25%.
well, the textbook answer is for a growing company, it's 10%,
Or 10%,
right?
yeah.
So 10% of revenue should be going to advertising
Right.
for
I
a
was thinking
growing
marketing,
company,
whole marketing budget. Yeah.
right? So, and that's a fair. He gave me the correct answer. It
Mm-hmm.
was the textbook expert answer, works for most situations.
Yeah.
But what I didn't realize was I was a niche market. I was already the 500-pound gorilla in the room,
Mm.
and was one of the only ones offering the services that we were offering. And so I didn't need to spend that much on advertising. So I went through and I'm like, well, I've got all this money to spend on advertising, so I might as well do TV advertising, right?
Wow. Yeah.
Because I had a bunch of money that I should be spending on advertising. So I went
Yeah.
through and I ended up wasting it. I shouldn't say wasted because the brand got more exposure, which came with its own problems.
Yeah.
but but it essentially wasted and actually caused us more pain. What I noticed was when we started doing TV advertising, when we started looking like a bigger company, people are a lot less likely to actually pay you.
Mm.
Like they don't
Interesting.
care
Yeah.
because they see you as a faceless conglomerate instead
Mm-hmm.
of, a small business owner. So if I'm looking at the owner in the face and I'm not paying him, I feel bad, right? But
Yeah.
if I'm looking at Walmart and I accidentally walk out with a candy bar in my pocket, do I care to go back and make sure I paid for it? Probably not,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Interesting.
Not advocating stealing candy bars. I'm just saying.
Right. No, no, no. Yeah, it's that traditional marketing aspect. It depends on the business, right? It's a business school answer. What do you think? Oh, well, it depends, and there's all these variables that always go into it that have to be taken into account. Um, and so, where can people connect with you or learn more about what you're doing?
If they want to connect with me directly, they can always go to my website, which is actually jakestrack.com. I've got a lot of blog posts on there about new ideas, business models, those kind of things, which is really fun. That's what I spend my time doing, is just thinking about different ways to accomplish things. And there's a way to contact me on there. The other way is, just go on to Mingle. I have a Mingle suite that it's called the Mingle Digital Office. If you go to app.mingle.com/events, or just go to mingle.com and hit events,
Mm.
there's a suite in there that says Mingle Digital Office. If you go in there, it'll actually ping my phone and tell me that you just entered. Hang out for a second and I'll join you and we'll have a conversation. I love talking to
That's cool.
people.
Awesome. That's cool. Well, thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, no problem.
All right.